Good evening from Swansea, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are listening to Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast, your one-stop shop for pro wrestling insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. Last night we witnessed arguably one of the best AEW pay-per-views to date when the company teamed up with New Japan Pro Wrestling for Forbidden Door 2, which featured several amazing matches, such as, most notably, Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay, and we're going to be talking about them all here today on the show. So, as always, we had to have a stacked panel, and firstly, the co-host of the show, Clark Taylor. How are you, Clark?
I'm doing well. I'm fired up to be back. That show last night was awesome. It over-delivered. I think the expectations were kind of low headed in. We were critical of a lot of things about this show, and I don't know. I think it over-delivered. At the end of the day, I'm excited to get into it.
I actually very much do agree with you, Clark, and you know, I'm harsh on AEW at times. But also joining us here is the head of reviewing, Coby Galenzoski. How are you, Coby?
I'm here. We got the Wrestling Republic Daily, of course. It's an odd thing to have this on a Monday, a big pay-per-view review in Forbidden Door. We got some matches to talk about. Rethinking life choices. I'm not life choices, rating choices from last night. But at the end of the day, we're here. I'm happy. We're ready to talk. And of course, next week is Money in the Bank.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is indeed. And also joining us today is another reviewer, David Sheldon. How are you, David?
Hello. I am very excited to be here. I am back in the Welsh country, back in Wales, and very excited to talk about a very, very, very good Forbidden Door show. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. I know we have some contrasting takes on certain matches. I enjoyed pretty much everything on this show. I'm very excited. Let's get at it.
Absolutely, and let's jump straight into things and talk about MJF taking on Hiroshi Tanahashi. Of course, MJF for ages now said, I'm never going to fight anybody from New Japan, as New Japan is an indie. Well, MJF came out wearing a robe which said New Japan is an indie, and that was absolutely brilliant. His reactions to Tanahashi being introduced was great too. And overall, it was, a fun match. Of course, MJF had to cheat to get the victory with that Dynamite Diamond Ring. But it was a fun opening to the show. Nothing to, go out of your way to watch, I'd say, but a very fun opening match. Some people were disappointed by this, but I said this on the show yesterday, right? Hiroshi Tanahashi is getting on a bit now. He's had an injured knee for 5 years that's never been repaired. People are comparing him to other wrestlers of his age. Well, it's not the same because Tanahashi, to be honest, has worked more events and has also, again, worked hurt for this long. It's not really fair to him, and I actually thought this is one of Tanahashi's best matches in quite a while now. But Clark, what were your thoughts on the opening contest?
I made a bold statement the other day, like kind of tongue-in-cheek, saying that this might steal the show. But I think this one over-delivered. I used that phrase earlier in the intro, that the show as a whole over-delivered. I think this is one of them that did. I think the styles matched up perfectly here, especially working around an injured knee. MJF making fun of his gait early in the match was hysterical. MJF being the absolute sleazebag he is and trying to walk out was hilarious. It built to a crescendo. The crowd got into it by the end. And of course, Max cheated to win, as we all probably expected. I loved the use of the Dynamite Diamond Ring. It took that to put Tanahashi away. Not, he wasn't going to tap to the salt of the earth or get pinned with a headlock takeover. It took the Diamond Ring, and I enjoyed it all around. I really thought for an opening match, this was about as good as you could do. And for an on-paper, finger quotes dream match, right? In a perfect world video game, for what they could deliver, given Tanahashi working around the bum knee, what more could I really ask for? It was a great way to open the show, and I thought that was brilliant. We criticized it, even myself. I criticized, really, that needs to be the opener, although I loved MJF's explanation. I think it was the right call. And then the delivery, in hindsight, it was better than I realized in the present, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about it because we were watching it. All four of us were on a stream, not a stream, but a call yesterday, watching it together. And we were talking about this, and we said, it definitely was the right choice to open because it was a slower paced match. You wanted the crowd to be hot for it, which they obviously are at the start of such a huge wrestling event like this. So I enjoyed it. I did. I do agree with you there, Clark. But now let's move on to somebody who's been very controversial. Well, I say being very controversial. He always has been very controversial, but his controversy continues, and that man is CM Punk. He took on Kojima in the first round of the Owen Hart Cup last night at Forbidden Door, and Punk was booed heavily. Like, it was worse than on Collision. They were very much against him, and Punk played into it. It was great. I really enjoyed it. And this was Kojima's best match in years. I didn't have any expectations for this match. And again, I wouldn't say, go out of your way to watch it. But for what it was really, really fun. And it was a match which I certainly never thought that I'd see in AEW, but I 110% enjoyed it. But what about you, Coby? What did you think about Punk versus Kojima?
I mean, I agree with the statement that it's a match that you don't have to go out. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say, "Oh, this is a must-see match from this show." But if you like that style of just two guys having a solid worked match, you can't get better than anything. Better than this match. We get Punk with his heel work because he's drinking in the booze and he's working with it. We've seen him do a number of Hogan spots and all that. He's working and he's doing his job. He's getting a reaction. That's all you can ask for from this man. The other note I have is it's just a solid, enjoyable match. It's not going to be remembered for the storytelling in the match. The storytelling was all right, but Kojima worked well in the babyface role, and it was just a solid. It's a stiff match. It's one of those matches that did deliver, and it wasn't. There's nothing you can complain about coming out of it.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. Nothing to go out your way to watch, but like you said, nothing to complain about either. A really fun match, and CM Punk advances in the Owen Hart Cup now to the next round, to the surprise of no one, really. But now let's talk about a match which a few people kind of did predict a surprise for, and that was the International Championship, as Orange Cassidy had to defend against Shibata, Zack Sabre Jr., and Daniel Garcia. And listen, I've been a critic of Orange Cassidy over the years. I have been. But this title run he's had so far has been great. It really, really has been. And this match was no different. It was a banger. I'm a big Shibata guy. I'm a big Zack Sabre Jr. guy. I think Daniel Garcia's got a lot of potential. And together, these four put on a certified classic. I really thoroughly enjoyed this match from start to finish. It was just super fun, feel-good stuff. Some of it was brutal as well with Shibata and Zack Sabre Jr. I'd love to see, because at the end they did kind of tease an Orange Cassidy Shibata Zack Sabre Jr. match down the line, because they're all, of course, I guess, kind of TV champions and then the International Championship. So I would love to see that triple threat if that is what they're building towards, and I'm certainly excited to see that coming out of the show. But David, you always go on about Orange Cassidy. You're a big Orange Cassidy guy. What were your thoughts on this match?
It was perfect for what it was. It was, I believe the match only ran 11 minutes. It was a proper sprint. There was no time to breathe. It was in your face, very intense, very well delivered. It's no surprise that four guys of this talent produced a match of this caliber. They are all phenomenal wrestlers. Sabre did some great work. My favorite point in the match was Cassidy and Shibata just sat there, doing the sitting pose and just wailing on each other with chops. Garcia was very entertaining. And I really like the finish of Cassidy once again, kind of getting out of there by the skin of his teeth. Kind of, he's winning in a traditionally heelish way.
Yeah,
he's winning by stealing a pinfall, but it doesn't feel heelish. Cassidy is broken down. He is winning however he can now, and the longer he survives, the more I get behind him. Again, we've talked a bit about Miro being the guy to beat Orange Cassidy, and I agree, I would have him squash Orange Cassidy, as I've said before. But if we're building those injuries, continuing to pile up, there's a really, really tremendous story here. I've said this is my favorite title run of 2023. In terms of in-ring match quality and consistency. Another tremendous match here. Very excited by the tease at the end. Absolutely nothing to complain about. Wonderful stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And we got numero one Superfly in the comments on YouTube here, who agrees as well, saying that he really enjoyed the Fatal 4-Way match. And he's saying, also, did anyone find it funny that Daniel Garcia kept dancing even after getting beat up by other competitors? And yeah, I mean, Daniel Garcia was criticized, right, for, not having, I guess, a character. To put it bluntly, that's what he's being criticized for. So, yes, some of this stuff's a little bit over the top, but he does have a character now. And learning under Chris Jericho, I actually certainly think will help him as well. But now let's move on and talk about the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship match as Sanada defended his championship against Jungle Boy Jack Perry. And this match was fine, right? There was nothing wrong with it. It was fairly fun, but it's one of those things where it was good for what it was, but it was nothing special. Sanada won with a moonsault, which he hasn't done for a while. He didn't use his new finisher, that I don't even know what you can really call it, but that DDT does as his new finisher. And instead, he won with a moonsault, which was a bit of a throwback to a couple of years ago for him. But I really did enjoy this match for what it was. But like I said, nothing to go out of your way to see. But what you should go out of your way to see is what happened after the match. Because, of course, Sanada won. He went up the ramp. And then Huck was at ringside. He was helping, take Jungle Boy up the ramp. And I was saying on the call, I was like, the heel turn's about to happen. It's about to happen. And then they cut to commentary. And that was a genius move. Because they cut to commentary and they cut back to the ramp about 20 seconds later. And that's when Jungle Boy turned on Huck. It wasn't quite obvious because they did it that way. It was very fun. And I'm very intrigued to see where this goes, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. Jack Perry is somebody who has a baby face, right? He looks like a face. So it is certainly a risk turning him heel, but they needed to do something with him because he has felt slightly like he's doing nothing. So hopefully this heel turn's successful, and I'm very interested to see what happens next with a heel Jack Perry. And also, it gives Huck a proper feud as well, which we haven't seen. So, Clark, what were your thoughts on this match and the Jack Perry heel turn, which you did call?
Well, first off, I never want to hear about that DDT finisher again after last night. Sorry to lead with an inside joke there, but we can't further discuss that because it's not the Sister Abigail, Coby. It's not the Sister Abigail. Anyway, the point is, the Jungle Boy turn I liked as the world's number one hookamaniac. Hookamania is going to run wild all over Jungle Boy Jack, the whole thing. I can't wait to see the Hookster in action. Hopefully on Dynamite as soon as possible. Red Rum, choke that little guy out with his curly hair and all. I hope they change Jungle Boy's music as much as I love doing the hand stuff and singing the song. If he's going to be a heel, let's make him a heel all the way. Let's have him go Hollywood, maybe even cut the hair. I don't know, change of a look. Something different would be interesting. I'm excited to see where this goes, but I'm more excited to see that first hip toss the Hookster delivers on Jack Perry because he deserves it.
Oh gosh, I'm glad that they're just going to give Huck something to do now, and I'm excited for this storyline. I truly, truly am, and I do agree they need to get rid of that theme because that is a very babyface theme indeed. But now let's talk about the 5-on-5 match where the team formerly known as the Hung Bucks, Hangman Page and the Young Bucks, teamed with an unlikely ally in Eddie Kingston and Ishii to take on the Blackpool Combat Club, John Moxley, Wheeler Yuta, Claudio Castagnoli, who also were joined by Takeshita and Shota Umino from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And this, listen, I'm not usually a fan of 5-on-5 matches. I'm not usually a fan of 4-on-4 matches. Trios matches is the most people I can deal with in the ring at once, right? It is. But I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of like little innovative spots throughout the match. It was something which was just very fun. Very fun, very enjoyable. There wasn't like tons of unrealistic kickouts either, which I was slightly worried about. Everything made sense. They continued a lot of stories within the match. And there was, of course, the involvement of Ishii was just super fun as well. I was actually slightly... I didn't expect the Elite to get the victory, but of course they did with Ishii getting the pin. So now where do they go from here? I still have a feeling they're heading towards Blood and Guts. I said it weeks ago, and I still think that's the direction they're going in. Of course, Bryan's now injured, which we'll talk about a bit later on. So who knows if that'll change anything. But Coby, what were your thoughts on this 5-on-5 tag match?
I agree with the statement that that's what we got out of this match. And I mean, it's hard to put that many people in the ring and have it be good. But one of the things I said in the review on WrestlingRepublic.com, there's my cheap plug, was that this match, it wasn't like condensed, or it didn't feel rushed, but it also didn't feel like it went too long. Like it went the right amount of time. It felt like a good amount of time. Everyone had their chance to shine, and that's what you want in these type of matches. I don't want to say compare this to the New Japan match, because we know how their cards are laid out most of the time, where the first half is a lot of these just six, 8-man tags, and then you have the singles matches for the titles or all that. But I mean, it was what it was. It was a fun, enjoyable match. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like it was too long. It felt like it went the right time. The only thing that, we did have the Will Yuta botch, and that obviously is never good. You don't want to see botches like that. To me, the ending was confusing, because as much as Ishii is good for this Forbidden Door standpoint and environment, he's not going to be here on a daily basis to continue this story. I don't understand why he's getting the victory. Because we saw Tomohiro Ishii get the win for his team over Wheeler Yuta. Wheeler Yuta did get the big rub at Double or Nothing, but he has taken a loss since, and I don't understand why this was the move. I was always on the Elite side for them winning the match, but I don't understand if that was the right ending. To me, that was almost an abrupt ending where it didn't make the most sense. It was not a perfect ending.
Fair enough. I mean, there is that argument there, and also there is also the other argument, the opposing argument, that, of course, it is a Forbidden Door pay-per-view. It is a crossover pay-per-view. And you've got to include, stars from another company who, aren't going to be involved in the storylines, but you've got to kind of bring them in, and you can advance storylines while bringing in those stars. But David, I know you were a big fan of this 5-on-5 match. So what do you really have to say about it?
I love this so much. We had a little bit of an argument on the call last night about just the extent to how good this match was. This was honestly, it's not I don't think it's the best match of the night. We'll come to that later. It's my favorite match of the night. I had the most fun watching this match personally. I thought the Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston storytelling was remarkable. I thought that the Ishii and Takeshita stuff was great. The one knockout blow from Takeshita to Ishii is horrible and brilliant, and I love it. I'll be honest though, I've slept on this, and I've thought about the ending from Coby's comments, and I do agree to the extent that I wouldn't have had Yuta take the fall. I wasn't actually aware that Yuta did. I thought Umino took the fall until I looked at it earlier on. It's surprising that you took the fall. I have no problem with Ishii winning. It's a neutral way to get you to the next part of the story, which I think is Blood and Guts. But I probably wouldn't have had you to take the fall here. That is a legitimate criticism. But I thought this was just unbelievable amounts of fun. But what I think kind of elevates it further is those stories that were weaved through the match. You had, like I said, the Kingston and Moxley, Kingston and Claudio, Takeshita and Ishii. It felt like everybody got their moments to shine. Everyone, aside from the Utah botch, it was very, very cleanly wrestled, very, very entertaining. And yeah, my favorite part of this story, I keep bringing up Kingston and Moxley, is that Kingston multiple times sacrificed himself or refused to deal punishment to Moxley, but Moxley did it at the first thought. Just cutted him out and cutted him without a thought. That's the character dynamics, and that's where you go from here. I think if they can really capitalize on that Kingston and Moxley stuff, you have golden television. I thought I was mesmerized by this. I really, really loved it.
I do agree with you there, guys, but I'm also going to have to jump in on this, right? We keep addressing it as the Wheeler Yuta botch, but it wasn't Wheeler Yuta's fault, in fairness, right? He actually did well to recover it. But let's move on to talk about the next match, and that match was the only women's match on the main card, where Toni Storm defended the AEW Women's Championship against the New Japan Strong Women's Champion, Willow. And this match was actually really enjoyable. It was, for the time it got given all, it was very exciting. Willow looked great. Toni Storm looked great. They had, very good chemistry together. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It didn't get a huge amount of time. And of course, the Outcasts, helped Toni Storm get the victory. So it was very predictable. But for what it was, I enjoyed it. And now the question from here is, what's going to happen, because Sky Blue and Britt Baker clearly aren't happy with the Outcasts either. So I think we're going to see a continuation of that storyline, perhaps in Blood and Guts. Who knows? But David, what did you think about this women's match?
It was good. It was good. I enjoyed it. Not a ton to say on this. It's two good women's wrestlers having a good women's wrestling match. I like the Outcasts a lot. I've said this before. I'm glad that we're out of the vortex now. That was what made me dislike them. Was we had a vortex where they did the same thing, the same story every week for a month, probably more than that, and it really just made me hate them. I think they've, now that Storm's the champion, I think they've got more of a focus. They can have a kind of a focal point of that stable. I like it. I think attention now turns to the Owen Hart Cup. We've got Britt Baker and Ruby Soho on Wednesday, which is obviously a repeat of the final. And I think whoever wins that tournament, we've got a lot of title contenders in that tournament. And I think it could be an exciting way to kind of showcase a lot of challenges for Toni Storm, because Toni Storm's a great wrestler and like a lot of the matches that are on, the potential matchups with Toni are really exciting. So it's just a case of kind of, I think the Owen Cup is a good way of showcasing. I mean, on the 0 hour, we had Athena and Billy Starks, which I thought was a great match. Obviously, I know we're not discussing that here, but really, really great match. And again, two more people who I'd love to see fight Toni Storm. Toni Storm is an exciting wrestler because she is so good. I think we're going to build to more stuff with Hayter down the road, particularly in London. Yeah. But I think, I really like this. And Willow is great. Willow has accepted Julia's, has publicly accepted the challenge by Stardom wrestler Julia's challenge for her title, the New Japan Strong, which it should be great. I'm very excited for that match. So the match itself was what it was. Totally predictable, fine, good, well wrestled. I think the stuff that could potentially come off this is more exciting.
I do agree with that. And we've got Shard. Shout out to Shard in the comments, who's saying that Toni Storm is having quite a great run right now and that he enjoyed that match very much. But now let's get into a match which a lot of people didn't enjoy. And it was placed in a really bad position, right? Because it was placed between Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay and then Danielson and Okada. So it really was... It was kind of placed in the position for fans to get their breath back, to maybe go to the toilet if they needed to go to the toilet, right? And I cannot believe on paper I'm even remotely saying this is a toilet break match. But that was the position it was in, and that was Sting teaming up with Darby Allin and Tetsuya Naito to take on Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Suzuki. And it was fine. That's it. It was fine. Nothing special, nothing great about it. In fact, a few times, I mean, you understand it with their ages and everything, but a few times it kind of looked awkward and slow. there's not really much to say about it, especially not much positive to say about it. But it was just in that position for fans to get their breath back. But Clark, what did you think about this 6-man tag?
I thought it fit its placement on the card perfectly. And it, for what it was, like, we weren't hardly paying attention to that match given what it followed, but every time you'd look up, it was like, oh, there's Sting, or there's Suzuki, or there's Jericho. You know what I mean? Like, there was enough there that it kept you, you'd kind of check in, right? But
Yeah,
we were all watching it together, and we were kind of discussing the big one before that we'll get to, right?
yeah.
But for what it was, I thought it was fine. I think the finish fell flat here. For all of the multi-man matches, if we're going to talk about a finish falling flat, the roll up, and then Sting kind of defends, right? Doesn't allow the bat. It's like, okay,
It was bad.
yeah, it was just average, I think, at best.
Yeah.
But it served its purpose on the card. And so that for that reason, I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, the thing is that we mentioned this when it was happening. Sting, was in the ring and didn't break up a pin, and didn't try to. And it's not.
Okay,
it was really weird.
That was one of the worst spots of the night. But I don't want to throw Sting under the bus because I'm a big Sting fan. So I hear you. I remember exactly what you're talking about, and it sucked. But given his age and again card placement, I'm fine with it.
Fair enough. And we got Sean in the comments saying it was definitely a bathroom break. And we got Numa on Superfly saying the match was boring, but he thought Sammy Guevara, Chris Jericho, and especially Suzuki posing was very funny throughout it. Well, guys, we now, because we're going a full 60 minutes today, we now have 33 minutes of the show remaining, and we only have 2 matches left to cover. But these 2 matches, we rushed through the rest of this card because these are the 2 matches we want to talk about. And the first one being Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. This match was brilliant. I said earlier this year at Wrestle Kingdom, that match was 5 stars for me. The one at Wrestle Kingdom, easy 5 stars. But they might have topped it. They really might have. The action between the 2 was crazy. It was insane. There was story throughout. They built it up slowly. Everything made sense. Until the one-winged angel, Will Ospreay, hit and Kenny Omega kicked out at 1-4. That was my big issue with this match. I didn't like that part at all. If Kenny kicked out at 1 and then Will Ospreay showed away head and Ozcutter, Stormbreaker, 1, 2, 3, I'd been like, okay, maybe there was an adrenaline rush. Maybe you can explain it. But it wasn't like that. They then carried on for another 5 minutes. So I thought a few of the kickouts were overkill. But for the most part, the action in this was truly, truly brilliant. And I do think this is probably one of my favorite matches to take place in AEW so far. Will Ospreay was the right winner. There's no disputing that. I really, really do hope we see a third and final match between them for, to end the trilogy. I mean, a lot of people are saying that could happen at All In London, perhaps, and I would not be against that, especially because I'll be there. But I also, to be honest, wouldn't mind it happening in Japan either. These 2 are they work in the ring so, so well together. This was the match which I was the most excited for in the card, and it really, really did deliver for me. Of course, we here at Wrestling Republic, we rated it 5 stars. And just from start to finish, it was a banger. But Clark, I'm going to head to you first. What did you think about this epic encounter between the Cleaner and Will Ospreay?
I mean, I loved it. I thought instant classic, basically. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying the best match I've ever seen, but maybe match of the year, early contender. I mean, what more can you ask? Out of the gates, they had the cleanest arm drag, reversal, takeover, drop down, hit the ropes, classic professional wrestling sequence of the night.
Yes.
And then they delivered Cirque du Soleil, circus-esque acrobatics cleanly throughout the match. Both men bladed like an old school 80s brawl. This was nothing short of delightful. This is all you could ask for.
Yeah.
I didn't need a story to love this pro wrestling match. They told me one with the match. This was an action scene out of a movie, but better choreographed. And they did it in one take. It's ridiculous. You can't even make up what they did and how great it was. You can nitpick at little things. I loved the one count. It was classic pro wrestling because we talk about all the time the one-winged angel is the most protected move in wrestling. Nobody kicks out of the one-winged angel. Well, nobody delivers it like Kenny Omega. So you aren't going to get Kenny with his own move. And that woke him up, made him mad. It was like when Ali hit Frazier with a left hook, right? No, that's my punch. Frazier came back with a bigger one, right? That's the way I saw it. And the crowd popped huge for it. So I didn't mind that spot. Yes, if you just look at it strictly on paper, it's a little bit one count. Come on. Adrenaline rush. Come on. Okay. But I loved the story inside of the story there. Just like the no, not my move. And the one count kick out, I in the crowd ate it up. And to me, that was the ultimate measure because the building, it registered in the building. It's got to register there first before it does on TV. It's always different watching it on TV, as great as it is and as great as the camera work and production is. It's very different in the building, and everybody was on their feet for that spot when he kicked out at one. So I loved the whole thing, but I want to hear everybody else's thoughts as well. I mean, we all watched it together, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was the crowd did go nuts for the one-winged angel spot. They did, and the kick out at one, they went absolutely nuts for. It was probably the biggest pop of the night. Again, I still personally, if it was just that and then straight away Oz cut out Stormbreaker, okay, but it wasn't, and that's why I personally had an issue with it. But Coby, you of course rated this 5-star on the Wrestling Republic scale. So what did you think about this instant classic?
I mean, I 100% agree with Clark. It was a no-brainer, but almost the story of that kickout was what happened before. Because if we go back in time and we remember Revolution 2020, that kick out at one happened after they did the Golden Lovers, the Golden Trigger. The Young Bucks hit Omega with the double knee. And that's what happened. So it's almost like it's a Kota Ibushi move. And that's another way you can call it instead of the one-winged angel connection. But I 100% agree. It was a magical moment. I mean, we said this last night. This match plays out 100% differently if it's in Japan. And I like the fact that this wasn't in Japan because this was a match that truly did everything to work the crowd. We have Ospreay wiping up a Canada flag between his legs. He's taunting Canada. He's getting the heel heat. And it was the exact opposite. We saw in the first match that Kenny was the one who was dominating. This match was Ospreay getting that revenge and dominating Ospreay in Canada and working on him and doing the damage. And I really like that aspect that Omega got his. But I 100% agree, and I can say I'm second guessing the fact that there were too many near falls. But the thing is there's a logical selling of the kickouts. Because if we're looking at those near falls, we have a rope break after the Screwdriver and Stormbreaker. And then we have this one count where Kenny's so fired up. And then there's another kick out at 2, which is the same fired up, where we're not getting that aspect of, okay, well, where is he selling? Because he's kicking out with the same momentum and the same, inspiration with all of the kickouts, except for the rope break. So you can question the selling with that statement. I mean, the other note I have with this match is we talk about Roman Reigns and how he's kind of mastered the idea of less is more. And we see Roman Reigns in the ring, and he doesn't need to do a lot because he tells the story. He works the crowd. Roman Reigns being there has the crowd on fire or electric or invested, however you view it. This match completely avoids that. They avoided the statement of less is more. And I right, wrong, or indifferent for avoiding it, I think there's a lot of stuff in this match that I don't want to say is going to be forgotten about, but it's a match that definitely avoided that unwritten rule of less is more, and it's up to personal preference whether you like it or not. That way,
That is a brilliant point, actually. I mean, a lot of people loved it, but then a lot of people hated it too. Ignacio, of course, he was on the show yesterday. He hated this match because of the amount of kickouts and all of that. But David, what did you think about Omega versus Ospreay 2?
The first thing I'd like to say, I like to preface this by saying that I think the match was unbelievably amazing. Of course it was. Like, I watched it with my eyes. We on the call last night, we all kind of gave our ratings, and it was 5, 5, 5, and I gave it 4 3/4. I didn't give it 5 stars. I've slept on it. I've thought on it through the day. I've gone back and forth on whether it's a 4 3/4 star match or a 5-star match, in my opinion, over and over and over again, and I still haven't come to a consensus on it. Having said that, that's kind of arbitrary when a match rating, while of course it's great, either way, it's an incredible wrestling match between two incredible wrestlers. I loved all the heel heat stuff with Canada. Some of the moves were brilliant. I did take issue a little bit towards the end with a very similar complaint to Ben's. I really love the 1 count spot, but I think it needs to, like, the 1 count spot needs to either come early in a match or it needs to come towards the end of the match and lead to the finish. Otherwise, it kind of does undermine it. I mean, my favorite example of the 1 count kick out has always been Walter and Tyler Bate with the kick out of 1 off the powerbomb. Really, and the kind of the selling of that sort of, and that I remember was reasonably early. That it kind of at the beginning of the 3rd act. This felt like we'd had a few false finishes, like big false finishes before the point of the One-Winged Angel. So whether it felt a bit like a little bit of overkill, again, it's nitpicking. Again, you've got some nitpicking around the rules with the flag and everything. I know it's referee's discretion, but when you keep using it and keep using it and keep using it as a weapon, after a while, like, the ref needs to step in or call it. You don't want to call a match off like that, but it's minor nitpicks. It just kind of, it was a little bit of pacing thing that kind of made me question that 4.75 to 5-star. But again, terrific wrestling match, of course it was. Really, really enjoyed it. What I will say, just on the back of Coby's point about kind of less is more, 100% agree. These two guys have never been less is more wrestlers, ever. Omega nor Ospreay. They're both so intrinsic in that kind of, that their style of more is more, particularly Ospreay. He's slowed down a lot in the last few years, but even still. And I think I get, like I said, the difference in styles. I think a comparison to Roman is unfair, but I know what you mean by it. Like, as I said, Hulk Hogan is not the same wrestler as Shawn Michaels. They're two. It is just, like you said, it's different genres of wrestling, different styles.
Apples and oranges there, yeah.
Exactly,
right?
it's apples and oranges. And I think both are brilliant. It's the style of match you're trying to tell, and how you kind of work that into a story. And I think they're all of these guys, Omega, Ospreay, Roman, they all do a fantastic job for the styles that they want to put across. So it's like I said, wonderful wrestling match, like match of the night. Not a match of the year for me. I think that the original Omega and Ospreay from Wrestle Kingdom was better, only slightly. But I do think it's better. But I think it's certainly up there for one of the best matches of the year. Brilliant stuff. The bleeding was horrible. And the Tiger Driver 91, where they drop Kenny Omega right on top of his head. Oh. I get why they do it. Please, it's really uncomfortable by design, but I don't know how safe that was. But some of the spots were terrific, and it was brutal, it was nasty, and it was really, really great.
It really, really was. You made some phenomenal points there, David. And perhaps, the less is more thing that Coby said, it was another great point as well. But you also touched on it, David, at the start of there, how much we can, discuss these star ratings over and over and over again all day long. But at the end of the day, we all had a lot of fun watching it. And that's probably what matters the most. But now let's move on.
Just to kind of say why I mentioned Roman Reigns is because, and this is what I hate about the internet wrestling community. I'm seeing people saying, "Oh, that match was great," blah blah blah, and then there's people saying, "Wow, this is why Roman Reigns is far above." The fact that there's that instant comparison, and the fact that there's people gonna say, "Well, no, Roman Reigns is the best in the world," and that well, now there's people, well, like, how can you say Roman's the best in the world when we just got that match? It's a match. It's a comparison that I used because it is being used, and it's something that can be brought up. But like David said, it's apples to oranges because there's the purpose of their wrestling is completely different. Their style is different in AEW. The style is different in WWE. Wrong, or indifferent. It's all personal preference. If you like the Roman Reigns factor, if you like how he wrestles, that's what you like. If you prefer the Japanese style or Omega and Ospreay going work rate with a lot more near falls and going the distance in that manner, it doesn't matter. I shouldn't have to see someone saying, "Well, how can you believe Roman's the best when this just happened?" It's just the toxicity within the wrestling community that can never be approved, or you can't say that's a good thing that we see on Twitter.
I hear where you're coming from. I wish it was treated more like in MMA and boxing, like the pound for pound conversation, because a lot of that's personal preference, right? Like it's hard to label a heavyweight pound for pound best, but a lot of people believe Tyson Fury is the pound for pound king of boxing. In fact, John Jones is ranked on the UFC's rankings as the pound for pound. He's the heavyweight champ, right? But pound for pound on paper, there's an argument to be made. Well, doesn't that represent pound for pound should represent based on weight, right? You have a Volkanovski who's cleaned out the 145 pound division, Islam Makhachev who's cleaned out the 155 pound division and beaten, right? There's arguments to be made there. I think it's similar in wrestling, but it's very like you pick. There's no nuance to the conversation like there should be, right? Because styles make preferences and styles make fights. Styles make preferences. And if you prefer Roman Reigns' style, then he would be your guy. If you prefer a faster pace, then he wouldn't, because he can't work at the speed that we saw the match last night between Ospreay and Omega, right? That's not true. In his repertoire. Now, they also can't work with the power and explosiveness that Roman Reigns does. They're not 6'5", 270. So they're two different things.
Yeah. With that said, though, just as I'm kind of thinking about it, like now that we've brought it up, boy, Will Ospreay and Roman Reigns would be a unbelievable wrestling match, wouldn't it? I've just been sat because the thing is, like, they are such different wrestlers, but like I said, Ospreay and Omega worked a match to suit their specific need. If Will Ospreay or Kenny Omega was to then fight Roman Reigns, they would adapt their style to form a new kind of wrestling match, which is what makes wrestling so great. Is that wrestlers adapt to suit different styles, to suit who their opponent is. It's why Gunther can have two such massively different wrestling matches when he fights a heavyweight against when he fights a cruiserweight. People have their own style, and what makes wrestling so fun and what gets us so excited is the different ways that you can plug and play all those different styles into to mesh different kind of things.
Absolutely,
it's such a fun this is why I love wrestling.
That's it. That's great. That truly is that. It is the amount of dream matches as well. Like you said, Roman Reigns versus Will Ospreay. It would be filthy. It really, really would be. But just like you said, Clark, styles makes fights. And one style which certainly made a fight was last night in the main event where Bryan Danielson took on Kazuchika Okada. And I said going into this that I'm not sure how the American crowd was going to react, because I knew they were going to work a very technical style of match which would probably get over more in Japan or in the UK. And it really wasn't helped by the fact that they had to follow Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay. And I know obviously there was the 6-man tag in between, but still, it was, they were given an impossible task, right? The crowd had been there for 3.5 hours when the match started. Well, I say 3.5 hours, sorry, 4.5 hours if you include the buy-in. They were very tired, and it was a very slow, technical-paced match, right? So the crowd was dead for most of the main event. It was. That is the brutally honest truth about it. But the actual action between Bryan Danielson and Kazuchika Okada was amazing. It was brilliant. I loved every single second of it. Did the finish fall a little flat to me? Yeah, it did. But again, I think a big factor of that was probably the crowd. Bryan Danielson obviously hurt his arm. He fractured his forearm during that match. 6 to 8 week recovery. And yeah, I mean, that obviously probably affected a couple of things they could do. Some people said, well, maybe the match was meant to go longer. It wasn't. They only bought enough, time to go up to the hour mark, and that's what the hour mark on that hour, which was I believe 12 Eastern. It would have been at that time. They'd only bought that much pay-per-view time. So when it finished was when it was meant to finish. But the question is, and Danielson kind of hinted at it, that some of the stuff at the ending of the match was kind of simplified because of the injury to his arm. But still, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, David, I will head to you first. What did you think about this? Well, it was certainly a dream match between these two future legends.
Absolutely. Before I say anything on the match, I've said this a few times, but I would just like to say how wonderful it is that this match happened at all. Because lest we forget that a few years ago, Bryan Danielson was in retirement. And he has come out of retirement and, hope he's okay with his arm and everything like that. But just the fact that this match actually happened on television, two of the greatest wrestlers of all time, is marvelous. The match itself was brilliant. From a technical wrestling perspective, it was brilliant. I do think it would have gone down better in Japan. And I do think Japan would have given it another 5-10 minutes, probably. I think that I agree with a few people that said it was a phenomenal 2 acts of wrestling that didn't feel like it quite hit that third gear. I just seen Carl in the comments here, as mentioned about a potential Wrestle Kingdom match, which I think is where they go next. Actually, I do think that they will run it back in Wrestle Kingdom next year. Once Danielson's healed and he's only out 6 to 8 weeks, but I think they'll run it back again in January, and I think that'll give it that extra boost that it needs. The crowd were trying to get into it, I think, but they were you could hear they were so tired from Omega and Ospreay, because that was such a crowd work match. Just like I said, wonderful professional wrestling. I like the finish in theory. I think that they executed it well. I think it was just a bit of a strange way to finish a pay-per-view main event. I think if it opened, it wouldn't have had the issue. But because it main evented, that's what you send your fans home, and it was a little bit abrupt. Having said that, the actual wrestling itself was so good. Okada has the best drop kick. Of all the moves in the match, the thing I most remember is the drop kick. And
yeah,
so I'm going to say, yeah. So I'm going to say, yeah, wonderful wrestling match. Just think it would have gone into that next gear had it have gone a little bit longer. And I think they will do that in a Wrestle Kingdom in January.
I certainly hope so. And yeah, like you mentioned, Carl Kinahan, shout out to Carl in the comments, who's saying they can definitely have a better match at Wrestle Kingdom. And yes, we're a Japanese crowd. They would certainly love that. And yeah, Coby's corrected me there. I said American crowd. It was in Canada. Technically still North America, but yeah, it was a Canadian crowd. But yeah, that style of matches, it would get over better in Japan or a smaller venue in the UK. But Coby, I will head to you next. What did you think about Danielson versus Okada?
I think the match placement hurt this match the most. We have a main event that the crowd are genuinely drained out of it because, I mean, Daniel said it off air. They were there for 5+ hours. This is because the length these pay-per-views go are approaching how WrestleMania was before COVID. I don't like it that way. I'm not going to say it should continue that way, but I understand the fact that they try to limit the amount of pay-per-views they do. But I 100% agree with David in this. The fact that this match happened is one of the things that's going to be remembered. Keep in mind, this was the very first time either of them were in the same match ever. You can go to Cage Match and you can go on Okada's profile and search Danielson. There's nothing. You can do the same thing on Bryan and search Okada. There is nothing there is no recorded match of them ever being in the same sanctioned match for when the bell rings and they're in the same scheduled match. At the end of the day, I mean, this is my note that I said right here. The match is going to be remembered as the match actually happening. And right now, it had great technical wrestling. The fact of the matter is the crowd fell flat. And the story wasn't. I believe the story was rushed in this case. But this match is going to be remembered as actually happening, and the fact that it's great technical wrestling, and it was a fundamentally great match. To me, it was slightly underwhelming since we were hyping it so much as being this match actually occurring, but it did have a very unpredictable submission spot to end the match.
No, I will agree with that. People did very much overhype it. We got Ignacio here in the comments, and like I said earlier, he was not a fan of Omega Ospreay, but he was also not a fan of the pay-per-view. He's saying this was the most embarrassing pay-per-view this year. But
I'm going to quote Jose Mourinho: "If I speak, I am in trouble."
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, we need to get a debate between we need to get a debate between a few people and you, Ignacio, now about this. But Clark, let's move on to you and let's carry on talking about Danielson versus Okada. What was your thoughts on this? Well, a dream match.
So you're telling me now that Bryan's got the broken arm, he's not going to wear a metal cast and bang Okada over the head with it in the next match? I'm just confused, right? I can't go one day without trashing Cody Rhodes. Come on. But in all seriousness, it was awesome. I loved it. I really did. And I loved the finish, the omoplata, and then into the arm lock, basically a variation of the Fujiwara armbar, almost like a Peruvian necktie, but on the hand, too, with the small joint manipulation, which is allowed in pro wrestling. I love high-level grappling. It was high-level grappling. It was awesome. The amount of clotheslines Bryan took was awesome. I understand that the crowd was a little bit quieter than we expected, but Japanese crowds are really interesting because you get clapping and it's not the same for pops and whatnot. And so I don't know necessarily that a Japanese crowd is better for it. I think maybe a hot, scorching hot crowd, if they can figure out a place to do it like a Grand Slam, might deliver an unbelievable second version. If you can do that in Arthur Ashe, a New York crowd would eat that alive. I mean, that would be electric. Every move would land, every hold would land. And I would argue that would be just as good. And that's no knock on a Japanese crowd. I do think it would be amazing at Wrestle Kingdom as well. But my main point I would like to make is does there have to be a second one? Yeah. They had to do all the Frazier 3 times. Oh, let's do this one 3 times. You know.
I would truly love that. But now let's talk about Forbidden Door as a whole. Let's talk about the title of this video. Was Forbidden Door the best AEW pay-per-view to date? And of course, the one which instantly comes up when people talk about the best AEW pay-per-view is All Out 2021. We had that phenomenal match between the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros. And then, of course, after the main event, which was Omega versus Christian Cage, we had the debut of Adam Cole, followed by Bryan Danielson. And that show, you came out of it thinking, this is amazing, this is brilliant. And you kind of came out of Forbidden Door thinking, damn, I wish that was, that was a little bit shorter, so the crowd was more on fire for the main event between Danielson and Okada. I mean, we talk about this a lot, right? The final when you think of a show or anything, it's usually the last thing you think of. It's why Game of Thrones, right? The ending of Game of Thrones, a lot of people didn't like, and that basically ruined Game of Thrones for a lot of people. Now, just to be clear, I'm not comparing Okada versus Danielson to the ending of Game of Thrones, because Okada Danielson was a lot better. But it slightly did disappoint, whereas the ending to All Out 2021 didn't disappoint. It shocked a lot of fans. However, if you ignore the ending, the specific ending, the feeling you get the second it finishes, I actually think it was. I think it was the most consistent AEW pay-per-view to date. Almost every match was great, apart from the six-man with Sting. Omega versus Ospreay was potentially my favorite match in AEW to date. And just everything felt like it made sense until, again, the placement of Danielson Okada. Apart from that, I really thought everything was in the right place on the card. Everything made sense. The crowd were on fire for everything. So overall, for me, to be honest with you, if I ignore the exact emotion when the second that the show finishes, I think for me it was the best ever. But what about you, Clark? Would you say for you it was your favorite ever AEW pay-per-view?
I'm wearing the shirt that I bought in the arena at Now Arena at All Out 21. I was in the 5th row for that show, and so I'm gonna go with a strong disagree on this one. Now being in the arena, I'm biased. It was awesome. I mean, that show was outside of WrestleMania 12, which is my first ever wrestling show. All Out 21 is my favorite wrestling show I've ever been to. It was so much fun. Part of that is, and again, I'm not trying to bury myself bias wise, but coming out of the pandemic, it was one of the first times you could really go to a wrestling show, right? In 21, we still had to wear masks into the arena. And then there were, rules about that. But either way, it was, to me, as fun of a show as I've ever been to. So I'm going to give that the nod over Forbidden Door for me.
That is fair enough. Being in the arena for something certainly improves the experience. But what about you, Coby? Would you say Forbidden Door's AEW's best pay-per-view yet?
Not at all. I would not have said that. I would have not put this into conversation with AEW All Out, and because like you were talking about the finish, this one we were like, yeah, the crowd was dead, the show was too long, the match was slightly underwhelming. I want to talk about the business aspect, and we talk about how almost the landscape of AEW was changed when All Out 21 happened, because they had such a great pay-per-view that is going to go down as one of the best pay-per-views they will ever do. And then we have the ending that's like, okay, well, now they have Bryan Danielson, now they have Adam Cole, they have new talent, especially Ruby Soho. She debuted on that show as well. And they have Punk back. The emotion in that show is not replicated here. AEW 2 months ago is going to be the same company it is 2 months from now. And that doesn't happen. That is different from All Out 21, where the landscape did change. This one, it's just another pay-per-view that happened. It was a great show overall, but it was not a landscaping for the better.
Yeah.
It wasn't a landscaping change for the better.
Yeah.
That's definitely the wrong way to say it.
They didn't do any landscaping. They left the garden unattended to.
That is a great point, Coby. It really is. Obviously, All Out 2021 had a bigger impact than Forbidden Door will do. I 100% agree with you there. But from an enjoyment thing, personally, this just edged it. But what about you, David?
I think the two shows, I think we've focused our conversation on Forbidden Door and All Out 2021. There have been many, many other great AEW pay-per-views. I do think Forbidden Door serves a different purpose to AEW's traditional programming. Forbidden Door is a supercard of great wrestling. And I think for what Forbidden Door was trying to deliver, you can't ask for a much better show than what Forbidden Door did. However, if you look at if what you want out of it is storytelling, like Coby said, making things feel like that things are really advancing, things are kind of going forward, the more contained AEW shows there have been better. There are shows that you leave feeling like you're in for something more. Whereas Forbidden Door is for what it's designed for. It was done, I think, near flawlessly. So I think it's very, very difficult to compare the two. I think Forbidden Door was tremendous, as I think was last year's show, but I do think this year's was better than last year's. But I think Forbidden Door worked brilliantly for what it's trying to do, and I think All Out worked brilliantly for what it was trying to do. And it's apples and oranges. I love both, and that's not really an answer, but
fair enough. I completely do see that those points there. It is hard to compare them indeed, but we've got Ignacio saying, please close the door on Forbidden Door. I think that's a point we're all going to have to disagree with you on, Ignacio. But on that note, that is the end of the show. If you're on YouTube, please leave a like and comment. Thank you very much. If you're over on Spotify, a 5-star and a follow. They help us out massively. We'll be here an hour later tomorrow, 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.